went on holiday, we were, the whole situation was incredibly stressful for the whole family. And so we said, well, let's go on one of those holidays that you never think you're going to go on, all-inclusive package holiday to Fuerteventura. And we went off and stayed in a hotel. And Charlie couldn't cope with the all-inclusive package holiday because there's chips and the buffet and there's tomato ketchup and there are lollipops in the bar and there are other children who've got toys next to the pool, and he would just go along and take their toys. And we were telling him off all the time, every 10 minutes. No, you can't have a 15th, flipping lollipop or ice cream. And no, you've got to eat something other than chips and tomato ketchup for lunch. And he would take himself up to our bedroom. He would sit in the bath without any water in it. And he would just sit in the bath in his clothes like this, rocking himself backwards and forwards like that for about half an hour, trying to calm down. And when you have a boy doing that, you realise you've got something else other than someone who's misbehaving. There's something else completely different. So that was the point at which we thought, yeah, we need to get someone professional to come and have a look at this.
So good on that, Charlie.
So the school he was at recommended an educational psychologist, and she came and viewed Charlie in the classroom, and she didn't use the term autistic. She actually used something else. She suggested it might be something called PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance, which is sort of, people talk about a spectrum. It's not really a spectrum, it's a cloud. It's a sort of 400-dimensional cloud. And PDA is sort of one of the bits on the edge of the cloud. Anyway, Charlie isn't PDA, but that was the first indication that it could be some form of autism, and so that was the first point.
Well, it's hard to have life when you have autism, unlike others who don't, and it can make you get angry in some situations, and it makes you stay awake way longer at night, and you sometimes feel things that aren't there, like spiders crawling up you, but they're not there.
So life's much harder for him than it is for other people, and that's one of the things that we're always reminding ourselves. It's he's been born with greater challenges, and he's going to have that throughout life. It's not a, it's a condition. It's a genetic condition that he will have for the rest of his life, and hopefully he'll learn coping strategies and he'll understand how to manage himself. But it's always going to be there. And for him, he in the old days would be termed Asperger's, high functioning autism. He's got a good brain. He's good at maths. He's not one of the idiot savants, the Rain Man sort of people with that level of skills, but he's definitely got a brain of a mechanic, an engineer, a mathematician, a physicist, something like that. Whether he'll be able to access that or not, who knows? And for Charlie, anything that's new is difficult. Anything that's a change is difficult. Anything that has lots of sensory input, in particular noise, but also light, new people, and often touch, is really difficult for him. And that raises his arousal levels, that raises his anxiety levels, and then that manifests in bad behaviour. So what a lot of people see a lot of the time is a very naughty boy, somebody who's misbehaving. Actually, that's him not being able to cope with the situation he's in. Sometimes, of course, he is just a naughty boy. And one of the things we have to try and recognise is, when's he being a naughty boy and when's he being, someone who's struggling to cope in the environment he's in at that moment.
Even the faintest sound I can sometimes hear. And yeah, my sense of smell is better than other people. I don't really know how to describe that. But my sense of feeling is probably my strongest sense. Or my sight. And yeah, even if just something touches my head can feel it. And yeah, that's how I feel how all my senses are better than normal people.
So managing Charlie is a challenge. We when we embarked on this journey, my wife and I sat down and we decided what we thought was going to be most important, and that was for him to grow up confident, to be mentally healthy, and to play some role in society. We know categorically 100% that Charlie is not going to have a massive career in human resources. Emotional intelligence is not his long suit by any stretch. He's not going to be an executive coach. There are some roles that we can rule out. And, honestly, the way his academic progress is going, it's unlikely that he's going to be fulfilling many of those traditional kind of roles. He might turn out to be a brilliant mathematician, who knows, or something along those lines. But it's much more likely that he'll learn a trade. He might be a tree surgeon or a brickie or a plumber or something like that. And I would be, given where we're at right now, if he turns out to have a trade like that, I would be delighted. That would feel like a very good kind of outcome. In daily life, the most important thing for him is to know what's coming, to have advance warning, to have a routine, to stick to the routine, to have very, very clear rules and stick to those rules as well. So if other people are looking after Charlie, we'll always talk to them about, well, it's this time that we have supper, it's this time that we start doing the bedtime routine, it's this time that we read a story. When we wake up, this is what we do in this order. The weekends are often different, and if they're just free flow, some families see who knocks on the door. It'd be great fun. People will pop in and out. That's very bad for us. That doesn't really work. So we'll always plan the weekends, and he will know in advance what's happening each day. And if he doesn't, things can go a bit wrong. So that sort of predictability, pre-planning and routine. And sometimes looking after Charlie is like a game of chess. You have to think 3 moves ahead. What are we going to be doing at lunchtime? What are we going to be doing in the afternoon? And warning him and talking to him about it, and making sure that he knows what's coming and that what's coming is going to be okay for him.
Teach the next Einstein. So.
Hello, Charlie.
Okay. Good.
An early diagnosis, for us it was incredibly important because his challenges manifested when he was young. And it was very, very necessary. What we know about autistic people is that boys tend to get diagnosed earlier than girls. And there are probably good genetic reasons why there are more autistic boys than girls. But diagnosis in girls is probably one reason for it is that girls are better at masking their emotions and understanding how to sort of look like other people, even if you don't feel like other people inside. And so there are many more girls who are diagnosed in teenage years than early years, which is often a relief for those families. I think for us, an early diagnosis was incredibly important / invaluable, because we had a child who couldn't cope. I think one of the things about autism and autistic children is every single one is different. And there is that phrase that people who work with autistic children use. If you've met an autistic child, that's all you've done. You've met one autistic child. You can't really apply the learnings and the lessons from that child necessarily to another one. It's not like having flu or a cold or breaking a leg. If you've broken a leg, you've broken a leg. We know what to do about it. You've got one leg, you've got the same bones, and the blood vessels are all the same in all people. That's not the case with autistic children. Every single autistic person's manifestation is different to every other single person. So for us, we couldn't have survived without an early diagnosis of where he was at. For other people, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. So for Charlie, even recognising emotions is very hard, and managing them is even harder. Now that he's 9, he is becoming more self-aware, and he talks about his emotions and feelings a little bit more than he has done in the past. But getting him to talk about how he feels is very, very, very hard. And it is one of the things that raises his anxiety levels. So he's like a bloke, but like the worst bloke, you know. Why don't you just talk about your feelings? Well, I'm a bloke, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And an autistic young boy who doesn't understand emotions, getting them to talk about those emotions and try and explain how they're feeling is something that they find, and he finds, very, very hard. I find the best place to talk to him is in the car, because it's a safe environment, it's a closed environment. I'm not looking at him, I'm not making eye contact. I'm driving, he's sitting there. So we often have some of our best conversations there. And he often has his best conversations with his mum when they're lying in bed together in the morning or the evening reading a story, and then she'll talk to him about his day. And the same thing, you don't have to make eye contact in that, and it's a very safe, sort of enclosed environment.
Lots of people wish they were autistic, but if they were, then they would wish they weren't.
He's still very young. He's only 9. In terms of feeling anxious or feeling depressed, it's very early for us to start talking about things in those terms. He definitely has low self-esteem. He won't talk about that, and we don't use that term, but he's got a low opinion of his place in the world and his abilities, which is not entirely illogical. He's not doing well from an academic point of view, or from a sporting point of view. There's very few things he excels at. I wouldn't even say he's got low mood necessarily. He's like a lot of other children. He's up and down. It's dreadful, and then 5 minutes later it's not. Anxiety is definitely something that's almost always present for, I think, any autistic person who's got sensory issues, challenges with sensory overload. Anxiety is always close to the surface. So if for us, the resting state is 2 out of 10. For him, it's 3. He gets to 4 or 5 very, very quickly, and then he can get to 10 very, very quickly as well. And then that manifests itself in behaviour. So Charlie's relationships with other children are very shallow. He struggles to maintain friendships in the way that other children have got friends. In the last 6 to 9 months, that's actually improved. So if you were interviewing me half a year ago, I would say he hasn't got any friends at all. But now he has, and they are people that we can let them play together in a way that we couldn't have done 12 months ago. We would have just had to be there all the time, making sure that the other child wasn't going to be hurt or made to feel bad, or things going wrong. So that's part of growing up. Charlie would be extremely prone to bullying. Doesn't happen in the school he's in at the moment, but in a normal school he would be ever so easy to take the mickey out of. I mean, you can just light his touch paper in a second and he goes bonkers. So a normal kind of school environment, or a workplace, or anywhere like that where people are sometimes just having a bit of banter, and the friends he's got are calm, lovely, empathetic people. So he's actually got some friends now who are really good for him, which is nice. That makes a difference. Well, areas of strength for him, he's good at trampolining. Actually, this is a tip for a parent. If you have an autistic kid, get a trampoline. He spends hours on it. I mean, hours. And the other one I would say is stick at reading. So he's good at reading. He was slow to it behind other children, but then eventually it clicked like that. And so he does read. And his reading age is advanced than his age. So I think his reading age is 11 and a half or something like that. And that's opened up a new world. So he does, and again, he doesn't naturally sit down and read a book, but he can do, and he will do, and he likes stories, and he will read books for himself. So yeah, sticking at reading, that's where we're at the moment with writing. We're sort of, let's stick at writing, see if we can get there, because fine motor skills are very hard. He's very good at mental arithmetic, but he's behind on maths because his writing skills are so poor. He can't do complicated multiplication or division sums where you need to put your working down on a piece of paper. So things like reward charts don't work very well. He gets very angry if he doesn't get his star and they get ripped off the wall and thrown away. And I think one of the things we've learnt is saying if you're good for a week or a day or half an hour increases his anxiety levels, because then he's thinking about, oh, well, if I'm not good, then I won't get it. And it often makes him more prone to bad behaviour than the other way around. So we don't really use rewards for Charlie very much. It just doesn't work, mostly because it raises his anxiety levels. So we will sometimes withdraw privileges, which is mostly screen time for bad behaviour, if we think the bad behaviour has just been a naughty child as opposed to an autistic sort of anxious moment or period of time. But otherwise we've learned rewards are problematic. So eloquent autistic people will describe themselves as autistic, not as having autism. So I heard a very good speech from an autistic man. He said, look, there are tall people, but they're not described as having tallism. And there are bald people, but they're not described as having baldism. And there are short people and fat people, and that's not described as a disease. These are all things that people have, as in terms of a condition which expresses itself in how they are, but it's deep-rooted in the genetics of how their DNA is put together. And being autistic, therefore, is a description of a genetic condition. And it is a genetic condition. It's not a disease. There's very interesting research about some of the other contributors that there might be to being autistic, but it's a genetic condition. It's rooted in 400 different genes. Is the latest research and theory. So that's very insightful. And so autistic people don't like to be described of as having a disease. I've got a disorder. It's a learning disability. I'm autistic, but I don't have autism. I don't suffer from a disease. And I think that it's really important that we listen to the voices of people who are autistic in saying, that's how I want to be described.